Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at critical success factors,
Okay.
specifically in DevOps.
Yeah.
And the source material we're looking at is this research paper called Multivocal Literature Review
Yeah.
on DevOps, Critical Success Factors. It was published in the 28th International Conference on Evaluation and Assessment in Software Engineering. So pretty recent. I think we can skip over the basics here.
Absolutely.
This paper kind of jumps right in. And that makes sense given our audience, right? Folks already working in machine learning and data science and all that. So we're going to jump right to the good stuff.
Perfect. Yeah. It dives right into a very topical problem, which
Yeah.
is that we need speed and quality in software development.
Right.
It can't be one or the other. We need both. And it highlights the traditional models, the ones we're all familiar with where we had manual processes, very few resources, and these really lengthy release cycles.
Yeah, it feels like the industry has been struggling with this for a while. It seems like forever. So this paper is positioning DevOps as a potential solution. What is their take on what DevOps actually is?
They define DevOps as a set of principles and practices that accelerates communication and coordination among key stakeholders
Okay.
for achieving goals for software products and services. It's very much not just a set of tools, it's a way of thinking, a way of working.
So it's a new way of working together. And this paper also looks into the components
Yeah.
of DevOps practices. What are those?
They highlight three major ones: continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment.
Okay.
So continuous integration being that foundation where developers are merging code changes frequently into a central repository, and then they're running automated builds and tests. So right away, we're finding any issues.
That makes sense. And then continuous delivery kind of builds on that, right?
Exactly. It extends it. So continuous delivery ensures that we can release the software at any time.
Okay.
So we're automating that release process so that it can be deployed to production whenever we're ready.
So like having a software release on standby constantly. And then finally, we have continuous deployment.
Yes, so continuous deployment takes it one step further, and it actually automatically deploys code changes to production
Okay.
after it's passed all the tests. So now we've streamlined that path to production.
So efficient. The paper, though, also looked at specific factors that affect whether a DevOps implementation will be successful. Right. And they called these critical success factors.
Exactly. Critical success factors. They define them as the conditions, the variables, the characteristics that are essential for a project to succeed.
Okay. And what are the key ones they identify for DevOps?
Well, they highlight 5: DevOps culture, automation, monitoring and feedback,
Okay.
team leadership and collaboration, and then DevSecOps, which is this idea of integrating security into the development process.
Got it. So let's start with that first one, DevOps culture. What makes this so important for success?
Well, the paper is very big on this idea that DevOps is as much about the people, how they work together, as it is about the technology. Okay. So a successful DevOps culture really requires this shift, moving away from siloed thinking, where development and operations teams are just working in isolation.
Right.
So it's about collaboration, shared responsibility, continuous learning. These are key cultural components.
So breaking down those traditional barriers between teams is really key here. Did they break this DevOps culture concept down into more specific subfactors?
They did. Cross-team collaboration being one of the big ones. So not just communicating, but sharing responsibilities.
Okay.
And then supporting a learning culture where we're encouraging experimentation, knowledge sharing, and just continuous skills development.
So creating that right environment for those teams to really thrive in a DevOps setting. Did they discuss any other cultural elements that contribute to success?
Yeah, they highlight this idea of team and process efficiency. So not just working faster, but working smarter, optimizing those workflows, eliminating any bottlenecks, really maximizing that productivity and quality as well.
Yeah, so not just speed at the expense of quality. A well-oiled machine, as they say. Did they mention any potential challenges to establishing this type of culture?
They did. One being resistance to change. Which we always see, right?
Right.
Lack of understanding about DevOps principles. Maybe folks just haven't been exposed to that. Insufficient communication. And then, of course, the siloed thinking persisting.
Right. Yeah. So navigating that human element of this transition is just as important as the technical side. Now let's move on to the second one, automation.
Okay.
How does the research paper talk about automation within the DevOps framework?
Well, they emphasize that automation is a driving force
Okay.
behind DevOps.
Yeah.
So enabling faster and more efficient software delivery We're automating those tasks like testing, configuration, deployment, so we're reducing human error. And it frees up the teams to do that strategic work.
Working smarter, not harder. Do they call out any particular benefits of automation?
They do. They highlight improved test automation, leading to more reliable and efficient testing procedures. They also stress the importance of using specific automation tools and just shifting towards automated processes wherever possible. And again, this not only speeds up the delivery, but it also ensures consistency, reduces that chance of human error.
So automation is really key to achieving that speed and quality that DevOps aims for.
Exactly.
But even with automation, things can go wrong.
Of course.
And that's where that next critical success factor comes in. Monitoring and feedback.
Right.
Can you talk a bit about the role of monitoring in this DevOps environment?
So continuous monitoring of the software's performance in that live environment so that we can quickly identify and resolve issues to make sure we're having that seamless user experience.
So we have that real-time pulse on how healthy our software is.
Exactly.
But it's not just about gathering the data, right? We also need that feedback loop.
Absolutely. The feedback loop is just as important. So analyzing the monitoring data, incorporating user feedback. This is what allows us to continuously improve.
Yeah. It's that continuous cycle of learning and improvement. Let's go on to the fourth critical success factor now.
Sure.
Team leadership and collaboration. How does effective leadership play a role in this thriving DevOps environment?
Well, the research really emphasizes having that supportive leader that empowers their team, encourages open communication, and makes sure everyone has the resources they need.
So not just giving orders.
No.
Really trying to create an environment where that collaboration can flourish.
Exactly.
Did they mention any challenges related to leadership in this context?
They did. Communication breakdowns, which can always happen.
Sure.
And then the persistence of that siloed thinking. Even with good intentions, sometimes it's hard to break out of that mold.
Yeah, it sounds like leading a DevOps team requires a deep understanding of what that cultural shift really entails. Finally, let's talk about DevSecOps, this fifth critical success factor.
Okay.
How does the paper discuss integrating security into the development process?
So DevSecOps is all about weaving security practices into the entire lifecycle from the beginning. It's not an afterthought. It's part of the process.
Okay.
So the paper highlights continuous security testing, automating those security checks, and then having a shared responsibility for security across the team.
So it's everyone's responsibility, not just the security team.
Exactly. Everyone's accountable.
Did they discuss any specific benefits of this approach?
They argued that this shared responsibility, combined with integrating security early on, significantly reduces vulnerabilities. It strengthens the security overall. They're big on that proactive approach.
That makes perfect sense. Now, before we move on, I wanted to touch on something they mentioned in the paper. This idea of multivocal literature. Could you explain a little bit about what that means?
Of course. So multivocal literature refers to their approach. They're pulling insights from both academic sources, so journals, conference papers, that sort of thing. And industry sources, blogs, reports, white papers. So they're getting a broader perspective.
So getting a full 360-degree view of DevOps by incorporating both academic and practical viewpoints.
Exactly.
Very cool. Very comprehensive approach. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to take a moment to reflect here. Given these 5 critical success factors we've been discussing, DevOps culture, automation, monitoring and feedback, team leadership and collaboration, and then DevSecOps, I want to ask you, with your experience in machine learning and data science and mathematics, what connections do you see between these fields and the principles of DevOps?
That's a really interesting question. Just listening to you talk, I'm already seeing some intriguing connections. In machine learning, for example, we're constantly iterating on those models, right? Based on feedback from data to improve performance. That really aligns with that DevOps emphasis on continuous feedback.
Yeah. It seems like that iterative and data-driven nature of these fields could really complement DevOps principles.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll continue this discussion in part 2, where we'll look into some further insights from the research paper and delve a little deeper into the nuances of implementing DevOps successfully.
Welcome back to our deep dive on the critical success factors of DevOps. Before we jump back into the paper's findings, I wanted to pick back up on that last thought.
Oh, yeah.
This parallel you brought up between machine learning and DevOps, this idea of continuous improvement through data feedback, it's really at the heart of both.
Yeah. It really struck me how close those principles are. The paper also touched on the agile movement,
Yeah.
in software development. How does that relate to DevOps?
So agile methodology with its focus on collaboration,
Hmm.
iterative development, and responsiveness to change really laid a lot of the groundwork
Right.
for those principles that underpin DevOps.
So can we think of DevOps as like an evolution of agile principles?
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Um, they specifically highlighted 4 key principles of agile that resonate really strongly with DevOps.
Wow.
Prioritizing individuals and interactions over processes and tools, focusing on working software, over comprehensive documentation,
Yeah.
emphasizing customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and then responding to change over rigidly following a plan.
So those agile principles definitely seem to align with that flexible and collaborative nature of DevOps.
Yes.
But the paper also mentioned some limitations
Yes.
of working in agile teams. What were those?
One notable limitation they pointed out is this challenge of interchangeability
Okay.
within the team. So because members often have these very specialized skills and knowledge,
Yeah.
it can be really difficult to just swap roles or responsibilities.
So not as easy as just plugging someone into a new role.
Exactly. It highlights how careful we need to be with team composition,
Yeah.
having those clearly defined roles.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, let's circle back to that concept of DevOps culture for a minute.
Yeah.
Specifically, breaking down those silos
Right.
between development and operations teams. Did they give any examples of how companies actually achieve this?
Yeah, they gave several insights into the cultural factors that contribute to those successful DevOps implementations. For example, they really highlighted the importance of that cross-team collaboration.
Okay.
So, beyond just communication, it's about sharing responsibilities
Yeah.
and then having that unified approach to problem solving. They also stressed nurturing a learning culture where team members are encouraged to experiment, share their knowledge, and just continuously improve their skills.
So creating that safe space for learning and growth.
Mhm.
Did they mention anything else that kind of contributed to this cultural success?
Yeah, they emphasize the importance of team and process efficiency.
Yeah.
So not just working faster, but again, working smarter, streamlining those workflows, identifying and eliminating bottlenecks, and just making sure everyone's working in a way that maximizes both productivity and quality.
Yeah. That's about achieving speed and quality through efficient processes.
Exactly.
Did they point out any potential obstacles to building this kind of culture?
They did. They acknowledged that resistance to change, which we see everywhere. It
Right.
can really hinder establishing a strong DevOps culture. They also talked about lack of understanding of DevOps principles, poor communication, and of course, that persistent siloed thinking.
Right. So successfully navigating those human elements is just as important as addressing the technical aspects. Now, let's go back to automation.
Okay.
The research paper talked about the importance of these CI/CD pipelines. Can you just remind our listeners what those are and why they're so important in this context?
CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery, or continuous deployment. It's essentially an automated pipeline that streamlines the process of building, testing, and deploying software.
Okay, and what were the specific benefits of automation that they called out?
They pointed to a few, one being improved test automation, leading to those more robust and efficient testing processes. They also stressed the importance of using those specialized automation tools and just adopting automated processes wherever possible. This not only speeds up that software delivery, but it helps reduce that chance of human error and ensures greater consistency.
It seems like automation is truly a cornerstone of this whole thing,
Yes.
of achieving the speed and quality that DevOps aims for. But even with that robust automation in place, things can still go wrong, right?
Absolutely.
And that's where monitoring and feedback come in.
Exactly.
Can you just elaborate on how monitoring helps with a successful DevOps implementation?
So the paper emphasizes continuously monitoring software performance in that live environment. This allows teams to quickly identify and address any potential issues before they escalate, ensuring a seamless user experience. They also highlighted the need for consistency and efficiency in those monitoring practices, stressing the importance of picking the right tools to give us meaningful insights to make decisions.
So we're really trying to understand the health of our software
Yes.
in real time. But it's not just about gathering that data. It's also about closing that feedback loop.
Right. Absolutely. The feedback loop is just as important. So we analyze the data from monitoring and we incorporate user feedback. And this allows teams to identify areas for improvement and just continually enhance the software.
It's that constant adaptation
Yes.
and improvement. Now let's move on to team leadership and collaboration. The paper discussed the need for leaders who can effectively guide that cultural shift toward DevOps. What qualities did they highlight?
They emphasize having that supportive leader who empowers their team, encourages open communication, and ensures everyone has what they need to succeed. This creates a culture of trust and mutual respect, where team members feel comfortable sharing their ideas and concerns.
So it's more than just directing tasks. It's about fostering that environment where collaboration can actually happen. But they also acknowledge that leadership challenges can arise.
They did. They pointed out communication breakdowns. And that persistence of siloed thinking can pose challenges, even with the best intentions. Transitioning to a DevOps culture requires ongoing attention and effort from leaders to overcome these obstacles.
It sounds like leading a DevOps team requires a really deep understanding of those cultural nuances. Finally, let's talk about DevSecOps.
Yep.
How do they address integrating security into that development process?
So DevSecOps is about weaving security practices into the entire software development lifecycle from the beginning. It's not a separate phase at the end. It's part of the process. The paper highlights continuous security testing, automating security checks, and just fostering that shared responsibility for security within the team. It's about building a culture where everyone is accountable for building secure software.
So security becomes everyone's responsibility, not just the security teams.
Exactly.
Did they mention any specific benefit to this approach?
They did. They argued that this shared responsibility, combined with that early and continuous integration of security practices, can really reduce those vulnerabilities. And it enhances that overall security. They advocate for a more proactive approach, where security is a constant consideration throughout development.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I just wanted to go back to the idea of them using multivocal literature, where they drew insights from both academic and industry sources. It really seems to align perfectly with the essence of DevOps itself.
Right.
Which is all about breaking down those silos and bringing together different perspectives.
I think that's a great observation. By blending the rigor of academic research with the practical insights of industry practitioners, they painted a much more holistic picture of the factors that contribute to successful implementations.
It's a good reminder that bridging that gap between theory and practice is really essential for a successful implementation. As we move into the final part of our deep dive, let's think about this. How can we apply these insights that we've discussed, particularly these 5 critical success factors, to our own work or areas of interest, especially machine learning, data science, and mathematics? Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the critical success factors of DevOps. Before we wrap up, I wanted to go back to that question we asked earlier. How can we apply these insights, particularly the 5 critical success factors we discussed, to our own work, especially considering, our expertise in machine learning and data science and mathematics?
Yeah, I think that's a great point to focus on. One of the key takeaways for me is this idea of bridging the gap between research and practical application. The paper highlights that we need to combine academic rigor with real-world insights. And I think that's really important in fields like machine learning and data science as well.
I completely agree. We're always trying to connect those theoretical advancements with practical applications. Did they make any specific observations about the differences between academic and industry perspectives on DevOps?
Yeah, they noted that industry publications often emphasize DevOps practices,
Okay.
while academic literature tends to focus on capabilities and requirements. It's a subtle difference, but it reflects a broader distinction in focus, right? The industry is focused on implementation, while academia is more on those theoretical frameworks.
That makes sense. And it highlights the need for clear communication and shared understanding. The paper also argued that understanding these critical success factors can actually help us predict uncertainty in software development. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really powerful insight. If we understand the factors that contribute to success, then we can better anticipate and maybe even mitigate potential challenges. And that applies not only to traditional software engineering, but also to things like machine learning, where model development can be inherently uncertain.
That's a valuable perspective. So by applying these critical success factors, we can potentially create more robust and predictable processes. even in those fields that are characterized by uncertainty.
Absolutely. And I think it underscores the importance of continuous learning and adaptation. Technology is always changing, and our understanding of these success factors needs to change with it.
It's a great point to end on. This research gives us a really solid foundation, but it's up to each of us to take these insights and apply them in a way that makes sense for our own work
I agree.
and our own challenges,
Yeah.
and to keep learning and adapting as technology evolves.
I couldn't agree more. And one thing I want to emphasize is that these principles that underlie DevOps, things like collaboration, automation, continuous feedback, to security-first mindset, those aren't limited to software development.
That's true.
Those can be applied to any field where teams are working to deliver high-quality products or services in a complex and constantly changing environment.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the critical success factors of DevOps. We hope you found it valuable and that you can take some of these insights and apply them to your own work, particularly in machine learning, data science, and mathematics.
It's been great exploring it with you.